want to start with something that I want to get you guys' thoughts on, since both of you have such extensive background on military affairs. We'll start with you, Andre. You know, Scott and I, a lot of people have talked about Bakhmut, the cauldron forming there. Now we're seeing Avdiivka, the cauldron forming there. So what we're seeing now is the formation of multiple cauldrons simultaneously. Apart from just talking about each cauldron, what does that tell us when we look along because I suspect there's more cauldrons forming as we talk now. What can we take away from this formation of multiple cauldrons along the contact line?
Well, they are losing their cohesion, basically, of their force, which I'm talking about armed forces of Ukraine and all those volunteers, so to speak. So they are beginning to run short on pretty much anything, the power, personnel, and the hardware. So, and that's inevitable, basically. We have the decomposition of the front in a slow motion. And yes, Russia has the escalation dominance. And again, last time we spoke, again, it's confirmed. Most of the Russian troops which have been mobilized, most of them are still in the rear. They still haven't been deployed in the front line. So, and Russia is just waiting for probably their last ditch attempt. But obviously, by the formation of 1, 2, 3 cauldrons, it obviously stretches their forces, Ukrainian forces, and that prevents them from any serious attempt on what they want to call the counteroffensive, but it's nothing more than counterattack, So that would be my take on that.
Scott.
No, I agree. I mean, what we're seeing here, people have keep saying, when's the Russian offensive going to start? It's already started. I mean, offenses don't have to be they can be phased. There's preparatory work. We talk about intelligence preparation of the battlefield, and you also have just basically preparing the battlefield, prepping it. And that's where we're at right now. The Russians are putting pressure along the entire line of contact. And what this does is it forces the Ukrainians to commit resources to deal with this pressure. And then what the Ukrainians have done is, I call it doubling down on stupid. But I don't want to denigrate the professionalism and the bravery of the Ukraine. The battle for Bakhmut is just mind-boggling in terms of the violence and the courage on both sides. The Ukrainians are putting up a heck of a fight. There's no doubt about that. I bet you 10 to 1 that if you got a Wagner guy here today who was in Bakhmut, he'd sit here and say, those Ukrainians are the toughest guys I ever met in my life. I mean, hats off to them, professionals. They're fighting hard. We're winning, but they're doing okay. It's a big fight. Ukraine is gambling that they will be able to hold on to Bakhmut. I think it's a failed gamble, but by committing so many resources into the Bakhmut fight, that means that they can't distribute those resources where other points of pressure are. And that's why we're seeing these envelopments taking place along the line. Because the Russians are continuing that pressure, and when they find thinned, they're moving. So now the question is, what are the Ukrainians going to do about it? Because one of the reasons why they're having a resource issue is that I believe they're shepherding the forces that have been receiving this training in Europe, on the Leopards, on the Challengers, etc. And as this equipment arrives in Ukraine, the forces that were trained are being held back. They're not being committed, because they want to use them in this grand counteroffensive that somehow they're planning. The other thing that's happening is artillery. Just reading, various accounts. I'm sure, Andre, you read the same Telegram channels of the different, commanders and the people on the front. The Ukrainians are using a lot of artillery right now, and they're using it very effectively. I mean, we have to again give credit where credit is due. They have a deficiency in artillery compared to the Russians, but they're doing very well with what they have. They're putting fire out on the Russians. It's causing the Russians some problems in terms of developing an attack, because when you're being hit with artillery, it's hard to develop an attack. It slows down the pace of things, etc. But they're using ammunition that they don't have. They're basically eating into their reserves of ammunition, so that if they are able to develop a force capable of a counterattack, they won't have the artillery support necessary, because you're going to need a lot of artillery to basically nullify the first line of defense, suppress Russian artillery as you move forward, and then to break up a Russian counterattack. All those things are going to be necessary if your counterattack's going to succeed, which it isn't. It's going to get crushed before it even gets to the front line, the first line. But my point is, any hope the Ukrainians had hinged on their ability to sustain some sort of artillery presence on the battlefield. By doubling down, by putting so much into the defensive effort in Bakhmut, and now they have to put more into the other potential cauldrons, they're not going to have left. They're going to exhaust this artillery early on. And there's been talk that they were going to run out of artillery sometime this summer. I think the best guess was sometime in August. If they keep using artillery at this rate, that's going to mean they're going to run out of artillery sometime in July, sometime in June. It's just making the inevitable, sooner. And it's a collab. I mean, as Andrei said, I like talking with Andrei because he throws things out there that I'm going to steal because it makes me look smarter. So from now on, when people hear me talk about unit cohesion and things of that nature, I stole it from Andrei, but I'm going to claim it. But that's what's happening. The cohesion of the Ukrainian forces is breaking apart.
Andrei, something I wanted to ask you about, and since we've talked, there's been some missile strikes recently, not as heavy, but a few weeks ago we saw something different where there were a number of the hypersonic missiles employed. Yeah. We saw that a couple times, kind of like making a point. They hit a couple things. Why do you think we're seeing more hyper? Does it say they have more? Before, what we heard was this: they're doing that as a statement to NATO, things of that nature. What do you think? Why do you think we've been in the latest missile strikes seeing the deployment of more hypersonic weapons?
Oh boy, there are two factors, so to speak, tracks to it. One of which is, of course, now Kinjal is being used again. On the 7th of March, Friday, there were 6 attacks using hypersonic Kinjals, all to a devastating effect, including the penetrations of the bunkers. But I want to make sure immediately that we are not going into this conspiracy baloney from the Telegram channels when they speak about, they attacked some bunker where they killed 40, NATO officers. No, it's complete baloney. No. But Kinjal is being used in the combat capacity nonstop now. And it is not 1, 2. Now we are talking about dozens of attacks with Kinjal, which is becoming a mature weapon system. Yes, to show off and show NATO what it might expect, because obviously the range of the Kinjal with the accelerator in a form of the MiG-31K, you have like about 1,000 kilometers dash supersonic on the MiG-31, and then they drop the missile. It's another additional 2,000 kilometers. So you're looking at 3,000 kilometers combined. And that is obviously the statement. It's operational and strategic statement, essentially. And then there is another thing, and that's what many people, I spoke about it today, I wrote about 3 days ago. Get this, this has not been reported in the Western media, but it has been reported in major Russian media, especially RIA Novosti. Mr. Biryulin, who is deputy chief of the Russian famous corporation, which is, of course, KRTV, Корпорация тактического вооружения, which is the corporation of the tactical missile armaments, he made the statements 5 days ago, on the 17th, 2 days before Mr. Z started his visit to Moscow, and you can look it up, this article is there, he said, and the article title reads like this: if political decision will be made, we are ready to transfer hypersonic technologies to friendly countries.
Yeah.
So guess what? People of this statue, they never make declarations like this without having a goal from the much higher ups. And of course, when you read the article, body is like, oh boy, guess what? This corporation is the corporation which produces many missiles, but also Kinjal and Zircon. Russia is not gonna give Zircon to China. despite the fact that China does have naval issues with the United States Navy, because the United States Navy has an advantage in the beyond the first island chain. And I spoke about it, but the fact that Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin spoke 4.5 hours tete-a-tete, and on the 21st, they had this private, very classified meeting. It was announced, but nobody knows what they were talking there about. And this meeting was dominated by the people from Russian military-industrial complex. Mr. Borisov, obviously Mr. Shoigu, Mr. Shugayev, and everything. What did they talk about there? Well, we can only guess, and guess what? I will go out on a limb, and I will say that, especially after Pelosi snafu for China, and then U.S. Navy moving to carrier battle groups in and around Taiwan a few months ago, well, guess what? It didn't go that well for China, for all, intents and purposes, And guess what? I am absolutely positive they were asking for the Kinzhal, at least. Real hypersonic weapons. And that's what many people do not understand, that what China has are primarily, they say that they have aeroballistic missile, they have definitely gliders, hypersonic gliders. But how good are those gliders as anti-shipping missiles? We don't know. But here's Kinzhal, which hits it both fixed targets and moving targets, any way you want. And this is mature combat system. So guess what? So I'm pretty sure that this was a demonstration to you see, this is what we can do. Now you come in and ask, and we'll talk about it.
Wow. Scott, one of the things that you talked about many months ago is that with the industrial capacity of China, coupled with the advanced military technology of Russia, if they decide on, Russia's anti-aircraft system, Russia's electronic warfare systems, the advanced technologies that Russia has, if the two of those decide to marry that industrial capacity with that military technology, it's game, set, and match. Scott.
Well, it's definitely, we got to be realistic here. Russia and China cannot project military power beyond their borders in a meaningful fashion. All right, so it isn't game, set, match. America, Fortress America, no one can touch it. I mean, you can hit it nuclear, but then that's suicide. But Fortress America, it's ours. No one can come close to us. We can go out and we can make noise around the periphery now. We can make noise around Taiwan. We can make noise in Europe. We don't have the ability we used to have to meaningfully project power because we can't sustain it. That's one of the big. I don't know what we're doing with $1 trillion military budget, but we definitely aren't building a sustainable expeditionary force anymore. So if we try to infringe on Russia through Ukraine or China through Taiwan, we're going to have a problem because both nations have very credible military capabilities. But as you alluded, if they, and I have to, maybe Andrei disagrees with me on this, but up until recently, the idea of the Russians and the Chinese colluding in this fashion wasn't feasible. They both have independent military industrial capabilities, and never the two shall meet. I mean, they would sell some technology to each other, but the idea of a Russian design bureau working with a Chinese design bureau to come up with a joint system, no. I think Andrei's hitting on to something here, that we are moving in that direction. And if that happens, if you marry these two systems, and when I mean systems, defense industry systems, and they start collaborating, if you get a joint design bureau out there with the production capacity, because the Russians are really, really good at designing stuff. They haven't lost their edge that they had during the Soviet era. Those design bureaus remained intact, and these are some of the finest scientists. Look, just a little war story here, but back when in the START Treaty, the Soviets had to dismantle some of their submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and they were doing that at a facility, and the Iraqis got a hold of the mafia, and they went in and they grabbed some of these gyroscopes. I got one of them up here that we took from a river in Iraq, and they smuggled them in, and we found it and all that stuff. But when we got it and we took them apart, these were the kind of gyros that we used to take a man to the moon. When they took it apart and looked at it, when the U.S. got it, they went, "This is the gyro that the Apollo project was using to take a man to the moon." That kind of precision navigation. But the Russians did it. I mean, if you take a look at the drilling, because it's perfectly balanced, but it's balanced by hand. I mean, somebody's spinning it and bang, hitting it with a little bit of a drill to take out a little bit of weight here. Then they balance it again, and bam, they get here till they get to perfect balance. And you're looking at the skill that's necessary to do that, not only in the design, but the manufacture. You know, that's a very intensive way of doing it. Imagine you got the Chinese with perfectly balanced computer numerical control machines that can do all that by hand. And you take the Russian design and you now take it so you don't have to have a guy sitting there spinning it and balancing it and looking back. If you bang, 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 it comes out perfect every time. Now you can mass produce this stuff. I mean, the Russian technology is awesome. Let's just straight up and just say that Russian military technology is awesome. And if they can ever get that to be mass produced, the world is going to be in trouble, including the United States, because now what's happening is you allow them to accumulate the kind of military power that not only makes them a fortress, but if they ever wanted to, they can begin to talk power projection. Fortunately, the Chinese aren't in the power projection business. They're in the economic projection business. And that's the best gift the Chinese ever gave to us, is that, you know, we continue to be able to not have to worry about, because if the Chinese were called Americans, at some point in time, we'd have to worry about them landing in Mexico, them landing in Canada, and them building up forces. And that's because that's what we do. That's what America does. We put bases around everybody and we project our power. Thank goodness for us, the Chinese and the Russians are like that, because now that they've come together, the military potential is mind-boggling. And we don't know how to deal with it. Again, one of the differences here is that we build for profit. If you think that Raytheon is a patriotic company, you have no clue what Raytheon is. If you think Lockheed Martin really cares about the red, white, and blue, nope. Neither does, you know, Boeing. None of them. They all pretend to. They fly the flag. They care about the dollar. That's all they care about. And when they enter into an arms program, it is deliberate that they lie up front. That's what they do. They lie about timelines and costs, because then what happens is invariably the timeline gets dragged out, and that's done on purpose. That's called growth. And the Pentagon goes, well, that's normal. Yes, we can extend the timelines. We'll get more budget. We'll get supplementary budget, and it's going to cost more now. Next thing you know, a $500 million program becomes a $3.5 trillion program. And everybody goes, that's okay. And it takes forever to happen. You don't find that in Russia. In Russia, they design it, they sit it out there, they build it. It's done on cost, on time, sometimes before time, sometimes below cost, because they're actually patriotic. If you go to the Vodkinsk the Vodkinsk Factory Association, and you walk through their plant, everybody in there is patriotic. These are genuine patriots. I'm not saying that the workers with Boeing and all that aren't, but the managers walking through are patriots. The factory directors, patriots. There ain't no patriot in Boeing. There's not a single patriot in Boeing, because in their leadership, because they all work for the board of directors, and the board of directors all work for the dollar, because they're a publicly owned corporation that has to report to shareholders. And the whole way it works is, if the shareholders aren't happy with the return, they dump the stock, and then that's bad. You got to keep the stock. Stock has to go up in value. So you're sitting there pumping up your business, and that means that I was going to use a bad word. You're sticking it to the taxpayer, to the American patriot. Our whole system's broke, fundamentally broke. We don't even produce good stuff anymore. We really don't. The stuff we produce is expensive garbage. It looks good up front, but when it comes time to do what needs to be done, it breaks, it breaks, it breaks, it breaks. Look at the F-35, a piece of garbage. Look at the F-22, not as good as everybody says it is. Look at the M777, fired a couple times, it breaks. Everything we have breaks. Now we can take the Soviet counterpart. I can't speak about the Su-57 yet because I don't know enough about it. But I'll tell you what, Su-34, it ain't breaking. Su-35, it ain't breaking. Su-25, you could sink that thing to the bottom of the ocean, cover it in mud, bring it up, rinse it off, it's still going to fly. You know, everything the Russians build is just durable, functional, And it might not have all the bells and whistles as their Western counterparts, but bells and whistles break. The Russian stuff doesn't break.
There's a saying they have in sports: the biggest part of ability is availability. If it ain't running or ain't flying, it is of no value. I did want to go ahead, Andrei.
Oh no, that's what I've been talking about on today, as a matter of fact, in my video. And first there was Mr. Kelly, the senator and astronaut. I respect his accomplishments and all that, but I mean, here's the guy comes out and he says that, Russians so junky, they cannot even fly information. Then, of course, you have this guy, the lieutenant colonel, yesterday from F-16. Su-35 is junk. And he's talking about AISA, which is active electronically scanned array, okay? On the F-16, he says, I'm ready to go and fly, against those Russians. And I spoke a little bit about today, and the point is he doesn't understand that PISA, which is passive electronically scanned array on the Su-35, is still electronically scanned and can work in the active regime. It's electronically scanned array. In other matter that you have the different matrix and the different type of the signal processing. And guess what? Su-35 sees F-16 with its AISA twice longer than it does see Su-35. And it's like, guys, do they even understand what they're talking about? And when you look today, Mr. Shoigu, he kind of disclosed the number of the sorties Russian Air Force flew. It's 142,000 sorties they flew. They shut down about 700 fixed wing aircraft, something like 400 rotary wings, and altogether 20,000 all kinds of flying objects, including all kinds of the drones. I mean, this is insane combat record. And we're talking about, they are flying not in like this guy, he was like Sam Killer. Yeah, they fly actually in the very dense electronic warfare and air defense environment. They still have those books and, even some, S-300's already done, and they fly it every day. And the operational tempo is insane, considering the fact what they're facing. And that's how you begin to look at those operations like, oh boy, so it just, isn't that something? And those guys, you have to understand, some of those pilots, they have, and we will know it once it's over, hopefully sooner than later, and when the white books and those tactical and operational studies will start to come out, we will know. We know, I can tell you, guarantee now, Russian air defense, the way it works, it's just mind-boggling, okay? We will not know the percentage, but believe me, it's way above 80% of, actually probably around 90. It shoots down. That's how much of it shoots down. And then, of course, we're looking at the Air Force, and we look at the command and control, and suddenly you look at this, and it's just like, boy, you know what? This is the war which we didn't see in a long time, and you have the fundamental forces, services performing extremely well, even though last military thought, Военная мысль, one of the, it's a major Russian and Soviet magazine, of the General Staff and Academy of the Military Sciences. They spoke about the fact that still operations of Russian Air Force are somewhat impeded because obviously you fly into extremely dense electronic warfare and air defense environment. Yet, even under these circumstances, some accomplishments are just absolutely amazing. And the only thing I would say, however, Mr. Putin is on the record months ago when he stated, when they were speaking about hypersonics and other missiles, he said, we're not going to run out of missiles. We produce missiles more than the rest of the world combined. I quote him.
Scott, speaking of which, and this is another big thing that's happened since the last time, there's been a number of provocations, but our listeners probably want to hear what you have to say about the Black Sea, where we saw, I believe it was an Su-25 or 35. We saw the video. It flies over the over this MQ-9 Reaper. It seems to hit the propeller or something, flop some fuel on it, and down the Reaper goes. Of course, now afterwards, the U.S., oh, we've got to act. Of course, Lindsey Graham is the screaming Mimi. One day, literally, Lindsey Graham one day says, we need to attack Mexico. Mexico. The next day, we got to shoot down. This guy's just a nutcase. Your thoughts on the whole MQ-9 Reaper saga, Scott?
Before I go there, I just want to build on one thing shortly that Andrei said. At some point, just imagine, if you can, when this war is over and fighter pilots doing what fighter pilots do. Let's say that Red Flag or Top Gun said, we're going to convene the world's aces.
How many balloons did they shoot down? That's the question. Balloons. The balloons. The balloon aces.
We don't even have guys who shot down 5 balloons yet. I'm saying we're going to gather all the people who shot down, aces, 5 aircraft, and then bring them all together and have a big party. It would be Russians. That's it. No one else. No one else is going to show up. We don't have aces. No one else has aces. So when we talk, because I just, Andrei talked about the American pilot. Bring it on. Dude, you haven't done anything except blow up wedding parties and goat farmers in a non-air defense environment. I don't want to hear anything from any American pilots anymore. We haven't done anything. We don't even train properly. Be honest, American pilots. At Red Flag, are you really training for this fight? Are you really shutting down all your electronics? Can you operate in an electronic warfare intensive environment? Can you operate in a air defense intensive environment? I'm not talking about the fake stuff. I'm talking about real integrated air defense where they reach out and touch you right as soon as you take off. And that in order to get in, you have to work your way through multiple layers of air defense. We don't even know how to do that. The Russians are doing it on a daily basis. So when we start talking about, when you have people, denigrating, they say, I don't think an American pilot could have pulled off that fuel dump maneuver against the MQ-9. Would have crashed the airplane, stalled the airplane, something. But the Russians, they're good pilots. They're good pilots. Let's just be straight up about that. Now with the MQ-9, when it happened, what I said is, I took a look at the video and I saw the pod underneath the left wing. It's an electronic warfare. I mean, it's not electronic warfare. It's a SIGINT pod. It captures signals intelligence. It's capturing, cell phones, radios, radars, whatever. Now, why? Why would you be capturing that stuff? Well, are you going to just put it in the American database? Nope. You're going to be transmitting it to the Ukrainians. For what? For them to prepare potential operations. The exact area that we were collecting on just the other night was attacked by underwater drones. How did the Ukrainians build up the intelligence to support that attack? By the United States providing it, both with the MQ-9 and I forget the Global Hawk that flew afterwards. So the idea that we're trying to claim innocent passage. Innocent passage is basically if because coastlines do this. So as you go your 12 kilometers out or 12 miles out and all that, innocent passage means that when you fly along the coast, you don't have to do this. You can go in a straight line, even if you infringe on territorial waters, because it's innocent passage. That's what international law allows. To be innocent, you have to be innocent. And we were guilty. We're there literally as a combatant. Not only that, but innocent passage does not allow you to infringe on exclusion zones. And the Russians had created exclusion zones saying this is a militarily sensitive area. Now we claim it can't be because Russia doesn't own Crimea. Therefore, the territorial waters belong to Ukraine and Russia can't impose a exclusion zone on Ukrainian water. But we're playing legal niceties. The Russians are playing the real world. And the real world is Crimea is Russia and will forever be Russia. And that is Russian territorial water. And an exclusion zone is a Russian exclusion zone. So here they come. And we're collecting intelligence. We're providing it to Ukrainians. And it's no longer a hypothetical. It's not saying, well, they could do something. They did it. And the timing of it is such that that intelligence had to come from a U.S. collector in recent times. Now, I don't know if that pod was broadcasting stuff. Probably was. But it doesn't matter. The Global Hawk came in afterwards and collected data as well. We are active participants in this conflict. So Lindsey Graham needs to be careful because the Russians have every legal right to shoot down everything we bring up near their coast because it's all hostile. There's no such thing as innocent passage. Again, I don't want to get into too much here, but if the Su-27 made physical contact with that drone, I don't think we would have seen that drone flying nice and level. The kinetic energy that Su-27 would have brought to bear, it's a heavy airplane. It's coming in at speed. It makes contact. Things don't just, However, have you ever tried jumping out of an airplane into water? It's like landing on concrete. Fact is, it is landing on concrete. If you jump out at enough altitude and you try and do a belly flop, you will splat just like you would if you hit concrete, because water has a certain density. And when you drop fuel at velocity and the fuel maintains some sort of cohesion, and it strikes a moving object like a propeller, it can bend a propeller. So all the people are saying that the Su-27 struck it. I don't know. I imagine, though, had it struck, it actually hit it. That MQ-9 would not have been flying level like it was. I think the fuel did the job. I think these pilots are pretty good, and I think that every time we fly a drone like that, it's an active orbit. Look what we're doing right now. We're not flying those drones anymore. Why? Because Russia says we're going to shoot them down, and now Russia has even more reason to shoot them down. And if they collect that pod, and my guess is they are, and my guess is even if we thought we deleted the stuff from the hard drive remotely, we didn't, because the Russians are pretty good at this kind of stuff, that they will know exactly what we were collecting on. And that's going to be problematic for us, because when it comes down to when we're directing it to collect against asset A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all those assets relate to the defense of a Sevastopol naval base from any potential underwater or aerial drone attack, now the Russians will have the proof. Now, they're never going to release that, because in intelligence business, you don't give that stuff up. But the Russians will know, and we'll know that the Russians know. And this is just sloppy. This war needs to come to an end before people start doing even more stupid things. We've been dodging bullets. We've been very lucky that the Russians believe in escalation management, because if they are as hot-headed as we are, there'd have been some shootouts by now.
That MQ-9, but also, Andre, now the UK is saying they're going to send rounds with these Challenger tanks. A couple dozen. We're going to send a couple dozen Challenger tanks, a couple dozen this kind of tanks, so as if that's going to make a difference. But sure. The issue of the rounds, do you think they're actually going to send them? And what are your thoughts on that? Because President Putin did say that he would react if that were the case.
Yeah, Putin was going for propaganda moment, totally legitimate. If I would have been in his position, I would totally basically capitalize on the general knowledge in the United States. I don't know how true it is. Some people say it's not true, but the general knowledge is that, there were many veterans of the Desert Storm, who have been affected by the depleted uranium things and things of this nature. So he was playing for propaganda point. No doubt about it. He knows it. And but point is, so they will send those depleted uranium things, and what can I say? What are you gonna do? You're gonna blow the Challenger, which carries it. That's about it, And if they manage to shoot a couple or three of them, well, then there will be some again TV crew, so people with the Geiger counters, just having said, you see, they just basically contaminate our soil and things of this nature. But it was kind of like, let's push buttons a little bit here and there. In reality, Russians use tungsten in there, which is very dense, and it's a pretty good round, so I wouldn't put that much, veracity into all of this, except for one thing. And I believe Douglas McGregor had to also explain. People think that when they say depleted uranium, that we are talking about nuclear weapons. No, this is not fissionable material. It's just depleted uranium. It's a high-density material, metal. It might have some kind of background radiation. Nobody knows exactly what. Still, there are some studies which contradict each other, all the time about, that those Desert Storm veterans died because of this. Then say, no, they didn't. It was something else. Who knows? I don't know. But it's just a fleeting moment. Let's kind of play push buttons, here and there.
What about the Andre? I do want to ask you this: the Polish ambassador to France recently in France. Let's say I don't know if you've been looking at France, but garbage piled in the street, fires everywhere. It looks like a zombie apocalypse movie. But he gets there. Apparently, he gets a couple, a couple of shots in him, gets a few sheets to the wind, and all of a sudden he says, "If the Ukrainians lose, then the Polish army, we're just going to have to step in and make things right." And then a lot of people get up in arms. Oh no, we knew it. NATO's coming in, and that's the plan. And remember, add this to Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh said NATO has a plan, and the plan is if it goes bad for Ukraine, then NATO's coming into cavalry. Put all that stuff together? What does that mean, Andre?
In Poland case, it means, pardon my French, bad. Excellent, crazy Polish ambassador. Immediately after that, the Polish embassy issued clarification that he didn't mean what he meant. Next day, he comes out and begins to backtrack immediately. No, obviously, Poland is not going there. We're not going there. But it's still the danger to the Western world. Sure. Now, about Cy Hersh, I saw when he was talking about this thing. Listen, he saw the hardware of the couple combat brigade combat teams, of the 82nd, I believe, and 101st, and he's like, "Oh, NATO is coming." What he saw is nothing more than hardware for the brigade combat team, And there are some, obviously, the Abrams tanks. There are all those, Humvees and things, Bradleys and what have you. In the 82nd, I believe, 101st doesn't even have this. It's primarily Humvees and light things of this nature. But the point is, for some reason, he makes the conclusion that NATO goes in. And that's what the issue which many people do not understand. Strategy is the ability to match your resources with the political and military goals. That's the strategy, okay? And so when people say that NATO is going in, the question should be asked, with what? And I mean, show me the force. You can literally, even not being privy to the general staff, documents and general staff procedures, protocols, let alone what they get in terms of intelligence. We are not privy to this. Nobody, except for special people, privy to this. You still can use the paper and pencil and calculator, and you can approximately see what force do you require, for example, to interfere in Ukraine. I'll give you immediately. NATO doesn't have this force. And I can tell you now that my friend, he is a colonel of the central apparatus of the Ministry of Defense, former. He was the liaison between the general staff. He says, we don't even sweat about NATO because we know that there's nothing. And only the United States theoretically can muster this force over some period of time. But then, of course, we know that it's going to end up badly for everybody, So there you go. That's simple as that.
Scott, if you could talk a little bit about that, you probably know more. The level of resources that the U.S. would need to intervene, and I always put it like this: U.S., China, Russia. I consider them military superpowers and compared to the rest of the world. To go to the border of any superpower. Because superpowers are designed to defend their borders. To go to the border of any superpower and attack it is a suicide pill. But what does NATO have? What would they need if they were even dreaming about going to the border of Russia to intervene in Ukraine?
The entire U.S. Army couldn't do it. What we can do. If we're given enough time, is build a force capable of defeating a Russian attack against NATO. That we can do for a little while until the Russians put together that 1.5 million man army, and then they can pick a spot and focus on the spot, and then we can't because we can't be everywhere at once. But what we can't do is launch an attack against Russia. We don't have the force structure for that. People don't understand that when the Cold War ended, we used to have Army corps and armies in West Germany that were composed of divisions with corps support artillery, divisional support artillery. We used to have massive logistical support groups that had ammunition dumps and fuel dumps, and we had mobile maintenance facilities, because when you go to war, things break, and the whole idea is to get it back, repair it, get it back in, rotate, move, maintain momentum, all that. We don't do that anymore. What we've done after the Cold War is we went to the brigade combat team. And for the Americans, that's just basically, taking, two mechanized battalions, take an armored battalion, bring them together, throw some artillery in there, throw some logistics, throw in a reconnaissance unit, and now you have this self-contained brigade combat team, 5,000 guys. And it can go out there, it can fight, I don't know, Iraqis, it can fight some Afghans, it can go into Kosovo, it can do, what it can't do is survive on a modern battlefield. The brigade combat team will go in there and it will just shoot up, because it's supposed to be a self-contained entity. It doesn't work that way, guys. A brigade now, you throw away the combat team, make it a brigade, throw a brigade on its left, a brigade on its right, and now you have a division. And now a division can start working together in concert with the kind of mass and firepower necessary to have any kind of meaning on the modern battlefield. Look what the Russians have done, because the Russians did a similar thing, except they went to the battalion tactical group,
the BTG,
BTG. And it was, this reinforced battalion. You take a mechanized battalion, throw a tank company on there, throw an artillery battery, throw in some combat engineers, and there it was. And I remember everybody at, at Fort Leavenworth at the School of Advanced Military Studies, our brigade combat team will beat their battalion tactical group every time. Cool, you're a brigade, they're a battalion. That's how it works, guys. But they'll put a couple more battalion tactical group. But again, a battalion tactical group is supposed to be self-contained. It's not really designed to operate, because I remember people saying, well, the Russians have 50 battalion tactical groups. I'm like, yeah, but that really means nothing, because 50 battalion tactical group might be 10, might be 5, because they don't coordinate well with each other. So what the Russians have done now is, part of this mobilization, the Russians also went back to the drawing board and they went, no more battalion tactical group, guys, regiment. We're doing regiments. Why? Because regiment now gives us a mass, and the regiment's attached to a division. So now we're doing division-sized operations, and that's a whole different ball game, because now you're bringing in supporting arms. You're talking about different levels of coordination and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole different war, and the Russians are doing that. They've done it. They're done. They're finished. That's the battle they're fighting right now. Regimental, division, corps size battle. That doesn't mean the battalions don't have a purpose. Of course they do. Battalion's still the building block of everything, but it's no longer everybody looking to battalion do it. The battalion is now supported by the regiment, and the regiment is supported by the division, and the division is supported by the corps, and that's how they're planning for sustainability. We're not there yet. We're still with the battalion combat team. And as General Cavoli said, I mean, a lot of people aren't picking up on this. 37 Ukrainian brigades getting chewed up on the front line right now. 37 Ukrainian brigades. What does the United States have in Europe right now? 3, 4 brigades? With what kind of sustainability? What kind of ammunition do they have? We're going to run out of ammo. We couldn't project power 50 kilometers into Ukraine before it was all over, before it ended, because our logistical lines of supply we'd run out of fuel. That's it. Before we even made initial contact with the enemy, we'd be stopped because we ran out of fuel, because all of our fuel bowsers would be blown up by the Russians. And then we run out of fuel. We got nothing left. Now we're going to die because they're going to come in and they're going to kill us. But let's say, God forbid, we actually made contact with them. How many artillery pieces does a brigade combat team have? Well, they got a battalion. That's 18 self-propelled pieces. Now, maybe they can reinforce it. Let's say give them 36. Just what the heck? Let's throw another one in here just because we're having fun tonight. They're going to go up against the Russians. They're going to have brigades of artillery. That's beyond the battalion, because now that they've gone back to the division, each regiment will have its own artillery battalion, and each division will have its own artillery regiment and support, or brigade, or whatever they want to call it. And so when we have this meeting engagement, the Russians are going to basically dominate every aspect of this meeting engagement with artillery. Now, people will say, what about close air support? Yes, but what about integrated air defense? You see, this isn't Afghanistan. The special forces guys don't get to sit down there with their JTACs, big muscled guys. Oh, we're JTACs and we control the skies. We can call everything in. Well, that works in that environment, but it doesn't work that every time you key the handset, the electronic warfare guys pick you up and you're going to get hit with 15 rounds of artillery and you're going to die, because that's what happens when you key a handset in this war. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do any electronics. First of all, when you key it, you may not communicate to anybody because they've jammed all your frequencies. We don't know how to fight this war at all. And our aircraft, our close air support doctrine is going to fall apart because as we come in, as Andrei said, the MiG-31 over the horizon is going to go, oh, yeah, you're dead. Oh, yeah, you're dead. Oh, you're dead. And then if we get through that, then the Su-34s and the Su-27s are going to come in. They're going to shoot them down. There's no more dogfighting. This isn't going to be about dogfighting. This is long range over the horizon engagement. Up front, we're going to lose everything coming in. So now we have no close air support, we have no artillery, and we expect to survive? I don't care how good you are in that tank. I don't care if we have the best tankers in the world in that M1 Abrams. We can't survive when the Russians are blowing everything away with artillery and we don't have any support. They strip away our infantry, because if you know anything about modern tank warfare, the tank don't live long by itself. You need infantry out there screening. You need mounted infantry and you need dismounted infantry out there doing screening operations, because there's a lot of guys out there with in-laws and with javelins and with the Russian equivalents, the cornets in their version. And they get close to a tank and the tank dies. It's 100%. The tank dies. So you got to have infantry out there, but that infantry doesn't live when the artillery is taken out. So when you have artillery suppressing the infantry, stripping it away, the tank is a sitting duck. We will lose every tank every time. And this is what's going to happen. No matter now, that's America. And we're the best that's in NATO right now. We're the best, and we can't do it. Ask me how the British brigade's going to do. Well, before we talk about that, let's say, what British brigade? There won't be a British brigade. They can't produce a brigade right now. They literally can't produce a brigade. Okay, so forget the British. Let's talk about the German brigade. Same thing. The Germans can't generate a brigade right now. Nothing. What about the French brigade? Gosh, the French can't do it either. Maybe the Italians can. Nope. Nobody can generate a combat-ready brigade capable of power projection across the border into Ukraine, because NATO hasn't been spending the money on that. They just can't do it. The Germans, to get that one battalion, that reinforced battalion up there in Lithuania, that always just bothers me when I say that, a German battalion in Lithuania. No, not supposed to happen, but it's there. They had to literally cannibalize everything. Everything. They got nothing left. Nobody. NATO can't do this. Now, that doesn't mean that they will never be able to do it, but the cost is going to be horrific. And where are they going to get the manpower for this? Because it's, first of all, where are they going to get the tanks? Ask the Germans. Hey, how's that Leopard production line going, guys? You can't produce them? Why? Cost of steel's too much? Why is that? It energy costs. Well, you shut down your foundries. So you guys can't do anything right now. Nothing. And yet you're giving all your tanks away to the Ukrainians. You guys are geniuses. This is why the Germans are going out buying their tanks back from the Swiss, because they can't build new tanks. So their only hope is to go back and buy old tanks from the Swiss to have the capability. The German Minister of Defense fired the Inspector General of the German Army for saying two things. One, Ukraine can't win the war. Imagine that. Somebody being honest. Two, Germany can't fight. We got nothing. We're naked. And by telling the truth, the Inspector General got fired by a Minister of Defense who wants to continue to say stupid things about how Germany's going to do this, Germany can't do anything. Literally nothing. That's just a straight up fact.
Andrei, that brings me to this obvious question. NATO's trying to expand. We want to expand into Sweden. We want to expand into Finland. We're going to surround Russia. And I think Blinken or one of them said, yes, they think that they're stopping us. We're actually getting better. Now, based on what you and Scott have been saying, what difference does it make if you technically expand, as it were, into Sweden, Finland, or wherever, if you can't put people there? You can't put weapons there. Germany and these countries, Germany a year ago said, we're going to dramatically expand our military, and everybody got afraid. Oh no, Germany's military. And then a year later, they're kind of like, well, we don't really have the money to do that. We can't do that. So they're technically expanding all around Russia, but in reality, they got no military hardware to threaten Russia with. Your thoughts?
They will provide a number of the fat, prestigious, easily fixable targets, unmovable, which means Russians will move in one or more brigade of Iskanders. They will probably, Russia will probably come up with another military district, call it, Finnish military district. All they care. From Leningrad military district, they will create Finnish. Hey, more vacant billets for generals and, colonels. Hey, who would argue with that? So, and that's about it. Yeah, they will put there a division or two, so they put some, couple of regiments of their combat aviation. And that's about it. I mean, it's all, as I already stated, what can possibly Finland do? Unless Finland deploys and positions there nuclear weapons, any kind of serious missiles, and the same goes for Sweden. Other than that, it's primarily political propaganda, to show that NATO is a viable organization. But as long as no nuclear weapons isn't there, and no serious missiles which can threaten Russian cities, especially if we're talking about Scandinavia, it's St. Petersburg, obviously. It is obviously Murmansk, and, general area. Other than that, I mean, but again, as I stated, and it was clear, articulated by none other than Putin himself and Shoigu, that will take measures. And most likely it will be a new military district with enough power to basically wipe out anything which really, God forbids, comes down to war. Other than that, it's primarily to demonstrate that we can threaten, we can project power, we can play something here. But what can I say? I read some things written by Swedish military. Oh boy, Monty Python just died too early. I mean, they disintegrated too early. It's ridiculous what people think about it, the war. But what can I say? Finns is a separate story. There is a lot of, obviously, history there. There is a lot of not really good feelings towards Russians, obviously, for the reasons of the Soviet-Finnish War and what Finland lost. And then, of course, they had this, World War II memories. So, but what can I say? You look at this new generation, new crop of those politicians, like the Finnish prime minister, the girl who parties constantly, probably snorts cocaine. Everybody speaks about this openly. So what do you expect from people like that?
Last question. We're coming up on the hour, so I'll ask each one of you guys this, and we'll start with you, Andrei. And to get your thought, this is geopolitics. China going into the Middle East and making this Saudi-Iran deal. China is now, there's reports that they've done a loan, the first loan between the Saudi National Bank and the Chinese bank. Russia's sending, I think, Su-35s, Su-25s or something, a squadron of them. They're going to sell to the Iranians, the 35s, which is a heck of a good plane. What's happening in the Middle East? China's making big moves. There's big things going. Well, let me add this. One of the big discussion between Putin and Xi was this is the way I interpret it. We are leading things into a multipolar paradigm. When I look at what's happening there, and you got to add, Iran's putting out some pretty good drones. Iran's getting some military technology they're picking up. Anyway, put all that stuff together. China's in the Middle East. Big things are happening in the Middle East. Andrei, we'll start with you.
First, we need to remember that in February 28th this year, a Russian foreign minister and Russian actually finance minister stated that, hey, we are totally in favor of using yuan right now as the main currency, not only for BRICS, but for paying, for all kinds of things, like Saudis are taking now yuan for their oil. That's the end of the petrodollar, while Russian Chinese payments, 65% now in rubles and in yuans. And of course, the share of those grows. So Russia, by the way, the moment Xi left Moscow, you know what happened. There was Africa, all of Africa basically present, speaking to Mr. Putin. And there is a coordinated effort, obviously. So, and Russians, they are on record, they say, for now, oh, God bless, we support yuan as essentially the intermediate reserve currency. We're just glad to have it, So, and that's pretty much the end of the petrodollar. Because Russians, of course, Sudan now says, no, we want Russian naval base there. And Iran, yes, Iran, do not forget, there is another road, not just that one, Belt and Road, but there's another one, which China, by the way, has no access to. It is called North-South route, which goes from Murmansk through the ports of Iran. And Russians, Iran and Azerbaijan work really hard now to make it happen, and it's happening already. First loads and, have been already transported on this route. It's going to expand. So, we have the full reorganization of the whole area, Middle East and Africa. There is gigantic geopolitical shift. I thought the Soviet Union collapse was a big one, and I experienced it, firsthand, almost died 3 times there. But, that was a pretty rough time, to put it mildly. And and when you look at this is just geopolitical shift unprecedented. It's something, not once in a century, probably once in 2-3 centuries, if not probably 5.
Yeah, Scott Ritter, your thoughts. I mean, let me add this. The U.S. puts like 30 bases in the Middle East. China's, they ain't got no bases. They send some guys in with suits. The U.S. has AFRICOM all over Africa. I saw there's all over the net. There is in the Central African Republic, there's this statue of the Wagner Group. And they've got a picture of the Wagner Group, and then they've got like some African mothers and children, and the statue is the Wagner people protecting the mothers and children. Their T-shirts are big. I am Wagner. I love Wagner. All of those AFRICOM bases and all of those Middle East bases, the Russians and Chinese are making economic and diplomatic inroads that are unprecedented. What's going on, Scott Ritter?
Oh, what's going on is the fall of Rome. I mean, this is this level of historical magnitude. This is the fall of Rome. And remember, Rome didn't fall overnight. It took a little while for Rome to fall, for the empire to collapse. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the collapse of empire in the Middle East. The United States has spent easily since 9/11, our focus has been on the defeat of Iran. And we have, in 2004, King Abdullah of Jordan coined the phrase the Shia Crescent to describe an arc going from Lebanon through Syria, Iran, Iraq, down into Yemen. And what we've done is we've used the Saudis, Saudi money in particular, to create a bulwark against that. And then we've been trying to build up a capability to push back. We've challenged Iran everywhere. In Lebanon, we challenged them in Syria. We've challenged them in Iraq. We're challenging them in Yemen. And the Saudis are central to that. And then recently, we put a whole bunch of political capital on getting Israel on board, the Abraham's Accord. And so now we got Israel, opening up and normalizing relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain. And we've been putting the full press on for Saudi Arabia to begin this kind of stuff. And this is what we're all doing. And we're talking about building. I mean, if you go back and look at our fantasies about air defense, we're going to put in a THAAD-based, Patriot reinforced air defense network, all this kind of stuff. And we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars, and we've put all of our effort into this. Central Command, that's what it's all about. And the Chinese come in with their diplomat and go, hey, you guys, shake hands. It's all gone. Literally, it's all gone. It's done, finished. There's nothing left. literally nothing. Yeah, we've got the fifth fleets in Bahrain to support what? The Saudis aren't on board anymore. The Saudis are playing a whole different game. The Saudis are in the we're going to take care of Saudi Arabia. We're done being the the gas accelerator brake for the United States. We're not going to pick up the phone and pump more oil or pump less oil anymore. We're going to do what we want to do. And that whole Shia crescent thing, instead of being a crescent of chaos, which is what the United States is doing, it's now a crescent of cooperation. Now, it isn't a done deal yet. There's a lot that can go wrong, but Israel is very isolated right now, more isolated than it's been in a long time. And the U.S. is sitting there, with this whole plan that no longer is viable. It's a whole new game. And if the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement holds, we're talking about tectonic type geopolitical shift. It's the fall of Rome. Same thing in Africa. We built Africa Command. It's based out of Stuttgart, but we're trying to find a base for it in Morocco, I guess. But we've gone around. We have training missions everywhere. I mean, the American taxpayer will be shocked if they ever find out just exactly how many troops are in Africa doing what. And we're losing it. How? Well, every time we go in, we have strings attached, like the French. We ally ourselves to the French. French go into Mali. They say, we're here to help you suppress terrorism in the Sahel. But what we're really here to do is make Mali a modern day colony of France. And finally, the Mali people are going, no. And Russia's going, we can help you. And Russia comes in, they go, well, what do you want? No, we're just here to help you. Well, you want to kill bad guys? Guys, go kill bad guys. But don't you want to control our politics? We don't care about your politics. You want us to kill bad guys? We'll kill bad guys. Now, when we're done killing bad guys, you guys want to talk business? Yeah, but if we talk business, do you want to take over our bank? No. We just want to talk business. That's all. Pure business. That's it. And the Africans are going, wow, what a fresh. Now, they know this. Many of the Africans knew this about the Russians because back when they were the Soviets, that's how they operated. They came in, they were the anti-colonial force. And most of Africa hasn't forgotten that. And they remember that. And now, because of the stupidity of the United States, look, Tony Blinken traveled to South Africa in the summer, and he met with the South African Minister of External Affairs, and she lectured the heck out of him about the arrogance and all that. He's like, oh, no, we would never do that. I understand. And she said, well, I'm not accusing you personally, but people do that. They come here and they lecture us and they threaten us with economic sanctions, but we're a sovereign state. We don't. Yes, we respect your sovereignty. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations flies to Uganda at the same time Tony Blinken's in South Africa and turns to the Ugandan president and says, if you dare violate the sanctions and trade with Russia, we will sanction you. Everything that Tony Blinken said we don't do anymore, we do. Oh, and Africa is done with that. Finished. Fed up. Goodbye. And we've lost Africa and we've lost the Middle East and we're losing the whole world. I mean, eventually Australia is going to wake up to the fact that this AUKUS thing is dumb, stupid. You gave up 40 Collins-class submarines for 4 American nuclear submarines that can't operate off the coast of Australia. How stupid can you be? And what's the purpose of these 4 things? To protect your lines of communication. With whom? China. Why? Because China's the biggest trade partner. And who are you protecting this Chinese line of communication from? The Chinese. I mean, this is as Andre said, this is a Monty Python skit. Literally, Monty Python could go crazy with this stuff because it's that stupid. Literally, and here's the sad thing. You got Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and Joe Biden out there dressing up like adults, but every time they speak, it's parody. It's become bad comedy. It's so disgustingly stupid, everything they say. They're not even good at faking being adults anymore. This is literally the kindergartners coming out and playing grown-up. And you're listening, and normally you go, well, that's really cute, Jake. That's nice. But they're serious. They actually think that what they say has gravitas. Blinken is an embarrassment every time he opens his mouth because he's saying things that A, are lies, B, are so far removed from reality, and C, we can't back it up. How dare Tony Blinken talk about China? How dare Kirby talk about China? They don't understand. Every time they open their mouth and they say something about China, they're just digging the hole deeper. Hey, Blinken, Sullivan, Biden, you brought China and Russia together. And that's the end of America's global hegemony. That's why Xi Jinping and Putin said what they said as Putin put him on the car, taking him to the airport. These guys are friends. They like each other, and they've changed the world. The world hasn't seen this kind of change in 100 years. I will say the world hasn't seen this kind of change in 1,000 years. This is radical.
Andrei, if I may, one more question. You were in the Soviet Union during the 80s, and during and I do know from African people, I know a couple people that went to, during the 80s, went to college in Russia, that Russia brought a lot of Africans in. I know that when the United States was still supporting apartheid South Africa, Russia was pushing back against apartheid South Africa. I know that the Africans have a love for Russia. They see that as that was the only way they were able, and the same, I've been traveling South America, same in South America. They, when I was in South America, first time I went, and I was at this big thing in Venezuela, and all of these revolutionary people from all over South America were there. And the first time I ever saw that, I have a show on Sputnik, and I showed them my phone, and they saw the app for Radio Sputnik, and all of them took out their phones to show me they all have Sputnik and RT on their phones, that in South America, that's all you see is Sputnik. They are, they're naming their kids Vladimir. All you got to do is look at the Major League Baseball. Half the Latino kids got names like Vladimir and Lenin.
And Andrei.
Exactly. If you could speak on, before we go, your experience on the Soviet Union and Russia's relationship with Africa from what you saw, and how you think that transfers to today.
The reason I'm smiling, let me start counting. The all command of the navies of Syria, Angola, Morocco, Algeria, I'm talking both Arab and Sub-Saharan Africa, they are all graduate on my Naval Academy, the third faculty, which was called the third faculty of the Arab and African nations. My relatives taught that. And so it is a funny thing, because we had two huge Soviet faculties, mine, navigational, and there was a chemical faculty, which is, of course, was the dosimetry, and the other funny, even more classified than what we have been classified, which was called the general chemistry. I'm pretty sure they were dealing with the weapons. But the point is that even we weren't allowed into labs there. And we had the Form 1 clearance, can you imagine? And we were studying strategic weapon systems, so, but yeah, they were separate, and they had their own huge two foreign faculties. So these are just the part of it, that those navies, apart from the fact that, look at the Syrians, you go and spit on somebody there, they say, oh yeah, one of my relatives studied in Baku, in this famous Kirov Naval Academy, they know. So there you go. They're just one, so to speak, facet of all that. Not to speak of other guys from the same Sub-Saharan Africa who still continue to study. Just to give you an example, there is a whole company of guys from Angola, Congo, and I believe they're Zimbabwe, what have you, other, African countries. They have the whole company studying in the famous Rязань Paratroop Academy. They are still there. They're still being taught. They are in the engineering faculties, in medical faculties, so Kenya, and, and it's been like that for years. Russia and Soviet Union came in as the major anti-colonial power. And they remember this. There are many infrastructure projects which have been built by Russians. There are universities which have been built by Russians. Look, go further. Taliban, you say, okay. Even Taliban knows who built their famous Kabul Polytechnical University there, and hydroelectric dams. Soviets did it, And they now, guess what? Now Russia provides absolutely free the stabilization, food packaging, and something to stabilize Afghanistan as much as possible. And this were the Taliban, And then suddenly they go and talk to Russians, and yeah, I think so. At some point of time, Russia will have to kind of accept Taliban as the official, recognize them as the official government in order to stabilize under any circumstances, just stabilize Afghanistan, and then deal with the all. Obviously, Russians are on record with the Taliban with the huge caveat. They say, we know what you're doing to women. We're completely in disagreement. But if you need food, if you need fuel to keep country going somehow, and there are many Russian specialists back in Afghanistan, here they are, we'll try to help. And the same was happening with, as Scott correctly stated too, in Africa.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, guys. Andrei, tell everybody where they can find you online, your website, and your YouTube channel.
It's you can. My blog is called Reminiscence of the Future. It has this stupid moniker which stuck to me for 15 years, SmoothieX12 at blogspot.com, and I have my channel SmoothieX12 on YouTube. So it's easy to find me.
All right, good old Smoothie X12, Andrei. Scott, where can people find you online?
I wish I had a cool name. It's just ScottRitterExtra.com.
All right, and I'm going to go over, I think, my good friend.
Because I need to add you to my blog roll list. What is, again, your website?
ScottRitterExtra.com.
Okay, it's going onto my blog roll list.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Certainly appreciate it. And we will I appreciate you guys. This has been absolutely fantastic. And we'll get you back on again. Hopefully, it's been a month, maybe every month or so. If you guys got time, we can get together. It's been fantastic.
Sure.